All right, a year and a half past the beginning of the pandemic, and our property managers are still dealing with a lot of the fallout. So you're probably wondering, as someone who owns a rental property or is thinking about eventually buying a rental property, what do I have available to me as far as rules and guidelines? Can I increase the rental rates? What does a property manager even do, and is it even worth it? And these are great questions and valid questions. So since we get questions almost every single day about property management, who to talk to, what to know, we decided to go right to the source. We went to a couple of lovely ladies in our neck of the hoods. These ladies are from the Lower Mainland, British Columbia. We have Brooklyn and Cindy of Picket Fence Property Management joining us today. And they were fantastic to sit down and talk to, helped us understand some of the challenges they're dealing with right now, how much you can increase your rent by in this year coming up, and a lot more different things that I'd never considered and other people probably don't consider around property management and what you need to know. So this one will be a really interesting, informative episode for a lot of our clients who have just bought their first, second, or maybe thinking about buying their first property to rent. Or maybe you're in a stage where you've got a number of properties and you're ready to offload it to other people. Again, either way, time is money, and it's probably about time you start to think about hiring someone to do that for you. So again, this episode, I was joined by my partner, Derek Williamson. You got myself, Alex McFadden. Not in action today is our other partner, Dean Lawton, and we form Thrive Mortgage Co., one of the premier mortgage companies in all across Canada. We were super excited back in the summer to find out we are officially currently the #1 mortgage team in Canada, according to Dominion Lending Centers, which is the #1 brokerage. So pretty neat stuff, and we'd love to find out if we're a good fit to help you. So if you want to find out more about your own personal situation, getting pre-approved, or you have some clients you need help with, make sure to reach out to us on Instagram at Thrive Mortgage Co., at the YVR Remo Show, or check out our website at thrivemortgage.ca. Enough about us. Check out this episode, enjoy, and we'll see you next time. What's up, guys? You are listening to the YVR Remo Show, where we talk all things Vancouver real estate and mortgages, take boring topics and make them interesting. Make sure to stay tuned to listen to everything you need to know how to put cash back in your pocket, create wealth in real estate, and simplify the complicated. Why now, more than ever, are you guys so busy, and does everybody need to have a property manager?
It's pretty important, I think, for someone to have a property manager. There's so much going on. Things have changed so much over the years. There's different rules and regulations, the Residential Tenancy Act, Privacy Act. It's important to know what your rights and responsibilities are as a landlord, and a property manager can help you through that. We know the ins and outs of, all the different things that you need to do on a day-to-day basis, and you need to be smart and hire a professional if this is a business for you.
Yeah, and we just talked about the COVID situation a minute ago. Like COVID, and you guys obviously, we'll talk about what you guys actually do day to day in a minute here. But the fact that you guys, have the experience working with tenants, working with people to find tenants, I'm sure the last year to 2 years has been extremely interesting in regards to, obviously looking for tenants and just managing them in general. Like, how has that changed your business? And have you seen more people looking for property managers, since March of 2020?
I think there has been quite a few, because there's a lot of tenants that are trying to, like I said, say you can't come in right now, you can't do an inspection, and they need to know how to get around that. A lot of tenants think that they have, can make their own rules, and they can't. So it's been difficult, and a lot of people have come to us for that.
True. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, Derek's going to have a bunch of questions, but before I even let him start talking, we got to really explain who the heck the audience is listening to here. So, Cindy, since you've kind of led the charge there, tell us who the heck you are, and what's your experience in the property world.
Well, we started Picket Fence about 3 years ago. I've been licensed for 20 years, and Brooklyn's been licensed for 6 years. And a few years ago, we just decided we wanted to kind of put a brand together and make a name for ourselves. And, we chose that name just because we wanted to give our clients the understanding of the type of, services that we're going to provide, which is professional but friendly. It's kind of a hometown kind of feel, I guess you could say. we love what we do and meeting new people and helping landlords and tenants. And we felt that was a good way to put ourselves out there.
Cool. Awesome. And how many properties are you managing currently?
About 300 from Chilliwack to White Rock. So that's kind of our general area that we look after.
Wow. That's impressive. And, the one thing I'll say just in regards to property management is, we help a lot of people on the finance side get into maybe it's their first rental property or their second. I find these issues come up on the first because everyone just thinks it'll be easy. They'll manage it themselves. They'll save the money because they want the cash flow, right? And people really don't understand the amount of work that goes into it from your end. And I mean, in the last 3 minutes of what you said, the legal side of things, I can't imagine most people have any clue, the extent of the knowledge that you guys have gained from your experience, and just knowing how to, I guess manipulate's the wrong word, but understand and maneuver tenants when they're in the wrong spot, right? Mm-hmm. And it just goes so far. So what are the costs that people would typically incur in hiring a property manager?
We try to keep it simple. It's half a month initially to rent the property. And that includes advertising, showing the property, taking the applications, doing all the reference checks, getting a 1-year lease, doing the move-in condition report. These are all things that need to be done. And then after that, it's 8% per month. We send you a monthly statement and direct deposit the funds into your bank account each month.
Awesome. And that is a expense at the end of the year.
Correct.
When you're filing your taxes, that is a tax deductible cost for the investment property.
You bet.
Awesome.
Well, let's dig into this a little bit further, right? Okay, so you guys mentioned your costs right there. You work with all sorts of different landlords. I think you've mentioned this previously in our conversations, Brooklyn, that you guys are working from everything from a single landlord to people who own multiple properties. Like, I'm curious about trends right now more than anything else. Like, are you seeing a certain type of client more frequently than another? Just based on your business model right now?
Not necessarily. We typically, most of our clients, they're either moving out of town and they don't want to sell their home, so they rent it out instead, or they've lived in this home and it's been their family home and they've just recently purchased something else and they're keeping it and renting out their current home that they're in, or people are purchasing specifically for investment purposes. In this market, I'm not a realtor, so I don't know exactly, but obviously it's quite high. And I personally thought that people wouldn't necessarily be buying to rent out right now because the costs are very high, but that's not the case at all. People are coming to us every day with new properties that they've just purchased. So I would say more so probably people that are just purchasing just for an investment purpose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. Interesting. And that's really interesting to hear that. And we've noticed, particularly in the last year and a half, even in our team, we talk a lot to real estate as an investment, but we've also certainly noticed a big uptick in the what I would consider to be the first-time investor who's really opened their eyes to the power of real estate. Look no further than the property value we've seen in the last 1 to 2 years, which is actually pretty incredible. Now, on the idea of real estate as an investment, which is particularly what you do as a property manager, helping those people out, what types are you seeing more in terms of experience right now? Short, long-term, furnished, or maybe you just deal with one specific arena? Maybe you could speak to that for a minute.
Yeah, so we just do long-term. We don't do any short-term, more so just because any time that we rent a property, we are charging a fee. So I don't feel that it's fair to my client to rent it out for 6 months and then charge a fee and then another 6 months charge a fee. So we typically require a 1-year lease for any property that we rent out. That also kind of brings I don't want to say a better clientele, but these are people that know that they need to be there for 1 year. Most people are typically looking for even longer. The short term is more so people that, are maybe going to school or just started a job here and aren't really sure what's going to happen, or they're just looking for something short term and they really plan on leaving in the next few months. We also don't do any furnished units. We have done a few in the past, and we just feel it makes it a little bit more difficult as a landlord. If you are renting something furnished, you really need to be aware and okay with the fact that if something happens to your couch or your dining table or whatever, you're most likely not getting that cost back. It's not as easy as people think to just take something from the damage deposit. it's just more of a hassle, I would say. So we don't typically do that anymore either.
Interesting.
That's a good point. I got a question for you, just because Airbnb and short-term rentals are obviously becoming more and more common in certain areas. Do you guys ever think that you will manage that type of a property, or are there property managers that do that type of thing? Like, I know most people just manage it themselves.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that?
We personally don't. We're actually not allowed to manage Airbnbs with our license. However, there are companies out there. I'm not very educated in that area, but I do know I've actually shown our rental properties to certain people that work in the Airbnb industry and have companies that kind of look after everything for you. So you hire them to hire the cleaning lady and make sure everything's okay for the next person before they come in. So there are companies out there. We personally don't do that though.
Awesome. Okay.
Interesting. No. Now, with that being said, kind of thinking about the long-term piece, a lot of people buying their first property as rental or converting their existing property to rental property, they try to do it themselves the first time around, which is completely fair. Why not see if you can, go through the process of learning how to find a good tenant and how to get somebody in there, and then potentially, obviously, looking at it from a perspective of saving some of the cost or investment from their perspective. I imagine you probably see or hear about people making a lot of mistakes that first time around. What are you commonly seeing, or what are the biggest mistakes that your first time, I guess, landlords are making?
I think a couple of them actually. They don't follow all of the rules that they need to follow. They don't use proper agreements. There's forms on the residential tenancy website, but they don't include a lot of things like smoking or lawn care and things like that. That it's really good to include if it's a house or a condo. They forget some things, or they tend to meet the person and feel that they're their friend and this is a business. One lady we had actually, collected $500 damage deposit instead of $1,000 damage deposit that she could have collected because she was trying to be nice, which was a big mistake. They tend to let things slide when they shouldn't. You should really follow the rules, and people forget to do that.
Right. Well, and like with that, when you say following the rules and let things slide, like what are the typical outcomes that you've seen happen when they're either not following these rules or guidelines? Is there some really negative consequence that you've seen come up?
There is. If you let people slide every month on the first, if they haven't paid their rent and they pay it on the third or fourth or fifth, and you let that go every single month, the tenant gets used to doing that. And then when you're trying to crack down on them a little bit, they tend to think, well, will you let me do it this whole time? So if you go to arbitration, it will be a problem, or they don't give them the 10-day eviction notice on the second when they should. They let it slide a little bit, and that just brings them into a whole nother process that they don't need to go through. It's more difficult.
And actually, if you start letting someone pay on the 4th or the 5th every single month for say a year, you might, the next month say, okay, you really need to pay on the 1st. If you end up taking these people to arbitration, the arbitrator could say that you actually set a new precedent and they're okay to pay on the 4th or the 5th now because that's what you've been doing for the past year. Mm-hmm. So you really need to, even if you want to be nice or you're trying to stay cordial, you really need to follow the rules and the laws around it, or else you could just end up biting yourself in the butt.
Right. Now, based on your professional opinion, who has more rights, the landlord or the tenant?
Tenants.
Mm-hmm.
Tenant all day. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't know enough about the BC Residential Tenancy Act. I understand there are a lot of ins and outs. The eviction process, I think it was a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, if you were buying a property that was tenanted, you had the ability to remove that tenant. Now I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but now I believe if they are in term, you actually do not have the ability to remove that tenant. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's quite a few. I'll kind of touch on this a little more because it's quite a lengthy process, but there's only a few reasons that you can evict a tenant. First of all, the 10-day notice. If they're not paying rent or if they're not paying utilities that they're supposed to in their contracts, then you can evict them. The second is the 2-month notice. So that is if you as the owner or your immediate family is moving in for no less than 6 months, or if you've sold the home and the new owner and their immediate family is moving in for no less than 6 months. That's a 2-month notice, with the second month being rent-free. That is also only if the tenant is month to month. So if they are in their current 1 year or whatever the lease agreement is, you are not able to get them out with that 2-month notice until the end of their contract.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Some hoops to jump through. What is the process with arbitration? Like, is it, you apply and then they're seeing you 2 months later? Is it a pretty quick turnaround?
It's pretty lengthy actually right now. I used to see if I was going for a direct order of possession, say, or even just filing for an arbitration hearing, you could do it online, and we used to get the documents within a few days. And now it's about 2 to 3 weeks before you get the documents, and your hearing is about 4 months away.
So the 4-month notice, if you're doing a rent eviction, sometimes people call it, or demolishing the property or anything like that, you have to actually apply an arbitration before you're able to serve the tenants with that 4-month notice. The last month is rent free, much like the 2-month notice. And yeah, so you have to apply, you have to get all your city permits, everything, and put all permit numbers on the 4-month notice before you serve it to your tenants.
So, I mean, you guys have been doing this for a while. Have you found that the tenancy laws and the Tenancy Act have gotten a lot more strict, like over the last short period of time? Was it a lot more lenient before? What do you think drove most of those changes?
I think a lot of owners were just trying to move their tenant out for many different reasons. Either they were paying lower rent and they wanted to get rid of them and try to re-rent it to someone else for the higher rent. And the tenants were noticing, obviously, that was happening. So the tenancy branch changed those rules for that reason. And as you know, all the rent eviction issues and on the news and things like that, I think drove the tenancy branch to make the changes in the 4-month notice. There has been several changes over the years, but over the past little while, I guess also because of COVID, the rental increase restrictions, etc. There's been quite a few changes.
It's just no, go. I was just gonna say, I'm just listening to you chat, and it's just like it's. I hate to say it, but the theme of half what we do is that we're in a new generation as far as everything we say. A disclaimer because of COVID, but in addition to that, your job obviously has gotten substantially more interesting to have to learn these different rule changes and feedback around what you can, what you can't do, and who lets you in and who doesn't let you in. Is there any end in sight? I mean, I'm not going to ask you if there's end in sight of COVID here, but is there any end in sight to like any of these like tenancy freezes? Has there been a communication around anything going back to the way it was, or are we just kind of here's where we are going forward?
The tenancy branch has actually just announced that you can start increasing rent starting January 1st of 2022. It's only 1.5%, which is significantly lower than previous years, but again, because of COVID, it's lower. But finally, I mean, after what has it been, almost two years, I think, of rent freezes, owners can finally raise the rent, that 1.5%. I mean, for a lot of owners, that's not going to be enough for the costs that they've incurred, the property taxes and interest rates and all those sort of things. So those are obviously always increasing, and it's definitely difficult for them if they're not able to increase the rent on their property. But I was going to say earlier, I mean, it's kind of like anything else in life. There's a lot of great landlords and there's a lot of bad ones that have unfortunately kind of ruined it for the rest of them, and have kind of been the ones to create these very strict rules with the tenancy branch. And the exact same thing with tenants. There's some really amazing ones and some not so great ones. So the not so great ones definitely ruin it for the rest. And that's why we have these really strict rules in place now. And that's, I mean, just the way it is. I don't see that decreasing at all over time. I think it's kind of the way it is now. Tenants definitely have a little more say over landlords, I would say.
Interesting. So, I mean, this is really helpful to hear this feedback from someone who's working in the industry and seeing this all day. And, Cindy being in this, obviously, for quite a few years, you've probably seen the tenancy laws become more and more and more in favor of the tenants. It makes me think about just provinces and how they operate. A lot of people that we talk to won't buy rental properties in British Columbia purely because of the fact that you're hamstrung if you're a landlord to a degree. Alberta, obviously, we flip the coin. You're on the other side of the equation, and you're in a position where you do have I don't want to say power, but you have a lot more rights as a landlord when compared to British Columbia. Like, I guess kind of going back on that, do you think, and again, this is probably a question, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, so we'll try. Do you think that the fact that there are so many restrictions is one of the reasons we do have such limited rental supply from landlords? Do you think that's stopping a lot of people from considering pursuing investing and having people in their homes?
Absolutely. I definitely think that's an issue. Tenants, they do need to have rights, but for landlords, they, I actually just had a friend that decided to sell their home. They moved to another home, and instead of renting it out, they sold it just because they didn't want the headache or the hassle. And they knew that the tenant would have a lot of rights if they moved in, and then they wouldn't be able to move them out, et cetera. So I think landlords just feel they don't have the freedom to do what they want with their property. So they choose to sell it instead.
Interesting. So to me, what that says is, first and foremost, screening and the upfront process is way more important now than it's ever been. And it continues to be that way. Mm-hmm. And that ongoing relationship with the tenant continues to be so important. So you guys just got way more valuable, I guess.
I think it's also very important as well. I did want to mention this. Like you said, there's a lot of realtors that listen to this, which is amazing. A lot of realtors, and no hate towards them, and this is not their fault, but they are not educated in the residential tenancy aspect of things. And a lot of them tell their clients that they can just, buy the home, kick the tenant out, re-rent it for more. And that's, what we hear of most of the time. And I really would love to get all realtors to know that is not the case. Don't tell your clients this. It's setting them up for failure. It's setting them up to call me and freak out because they're now worried and have this huge mortgage, and it's definitely causing a big problem. So it would be lovely if the real estate council educated everyone with a license, any licensee, on these aspects, but that's not the case. So here I am to tell them all.
Perfect. What are there, like, on that note, like, that's really helpful for a lot of agents. There's probably a lot of relatively new agents, or maybe inexperienced in real estate as an investment, and maybe just don't know. Is there anything else that you see that would be helpful to clients or investors as far as common misconceptions that you're hearing that you would hope that there's a better general knowledge around?
I think the 2-month notice, when you are a realtor and you have a client that's purchasing a home, and you need to, and there's a tenant in there, and they want to, the purchaser wants to move in. It's helpful to give a little bit of time. Some realtors will do completion possession like right at the end of the month on the 1st. It's nice to have a day or two to kind of make sure that the tenant has vacated. Tenants are supposed to leave by 1 p.m. on the last day of the month, but they can't move into their new home until until 1 p.m. on the 1st. It leaves a 24-hour window where anything can happen. So a lot of tenants, they vacate, it's not a problem. But for some tenants, they can't move into their place until the 1st. And the purchaser takes possession on the 1st, and they want to move in, and the tenant's moving out. And, so it's nice just to give yourself a buffer. If you can even go, a week after the 1st, that's great for completion, so that you give everyone a chance to make sure that everything is done properly. And it makes your job a lot easier, I think, as a realtor.
That's really important. And that actually comes into play on our side as well, because maybe a client is buying a rental property and they have subject removal on the last day of the month, right? Mm-hmm. And the goal is to remove subjects on the last day of the month so they can issue that 2-month notice. But if for some reason we need an extension for a day, it's pushing everything again, right? So there's all this pressure to get it done in a short period of time. So when it comes to purchasing an investment property, realtors that are listening, I know it doesn't always work out as everyone had planned, but if you can time it so that the subject removal date is, maybe a few days before the end of the month, that is probably your best bet, just because it's, financing, as everybody knows, there can be delays, like, everything that comes into play with that. So it can easily push that out for another month.
Also, for us, it's very important, because we will have realtors that will text us or email us and say, okay, go serve the notice. And I mean, on the 31st, that's one of my busiest days of the month, and I'm not running to serve that notice right then and there. So if I don't give that notice directly to the person face to face on the 31st, there's no chance.
It's not deemed received if
Oh,
they
wow.
don't send it to them in person on the 31st. So if they're not home and we don't have time to go back or something, then it's not legal. The notice has not been served, and then you'll have a problem.
If we post it on the door, it's deemed received 3 days later. And if we send it registered mail, it's deemed received 5 days later. So it really is important. We ask all of our clients to give us at least a week to make sure that that notice is served. And especially when there's a sale involved, it can be so important because that can, I mean, we have had it turn into almost a lawsuit and very bad things happening. So you want to make sure that if it's someone working with a property manager, you give your property manager the adequate time to serve it. Or if it's yourself, you're on that doorstep handing it to them face to face, or else you'll have a problem.
Yeah, I think like this is such valuable information for everybody here. Not to scare you against buying. I mean, it sounds like we're trying to scare people against buying our own investment. But the reality is, I think what it is just like buying a home or anything. There's a lot of scary things that can happen and a lot of things that can go wrong. Yeah. Either if you have the time to research and know all of this, awesome, give it a shot, go for it, be your landlord. I mean, I personally do manage some piece of real estate, but even as a business owner, honestly, I got no interest or time in doing it anymore beyond this from that perspective. And one of the things that I'm looking at is when you're analyzing your investment. So just speaking to the audience here, when you're analyzing your investment, you're analyzing keeping your home, just factor in one day, if you were to, again, look at bringing on property managers or bringing somebody into it, how would that work with your numbers? Because at the end of the day, that's time. Time is worth money. What does that mean to you? So you said 8% of the monthly revenue is what your rent is what you're charging for a typical. Is that pretty standard across the board?
I think it's I think 8% is pretty much what everybody charges. I have heard people charging 10%. So I think 8 is probably the lowest I've heard of. Like it's very average.
Okay, perfect. So again, huge helpful information items for someone who's putting together pro formas or adding this into management. 8% to 10% is your numbers, and then typically a half month up front to get rid of the hassle of, hey, I'm your tenant and I'm calling you at midnight on Saturday and I need a plumber, right? So you guys get to deal with that fun.
Right, exactly.
Perfect. That's worth the money.
On a good note, as an investor, I mean, there's lots to gain as well. Obviously, as you know, someone else is, paying your mortgage and you're gaining all of that equity. So it really is a big win. And if you don't have all the headache and you have a property manager instead, it's the money's just coming in and you're gaining.
Agreed. Was there anything in parting that you really wanted to add as far as value to the listeners? Anything informational or educational that they need to take away outside of what we already discussed today?
Yeah, I think we discussed a lot about the residential tenancy rent and the rules around evictions and things like that. As for our business in particular, we feel like we have a lot to offer our clients that kind of sets us apart from the rest. We are, like we said, just kind of a smaller, mother-daughter team that we do look after 300 properties between Chilliwack and White Rock. But we are there 24/7 for our clients, which we find is really important. Customer service is our number one, and really just showing our clients that we really appreciate them. I mean, without them, obviously, we would not have this business. So it's really important for our clients to know, and I think it makes them feel much better that when they email us or call us or text us, it is us on the other end, and we are always answering them. We're independent, so we hang our license at Royal Page, North Star. Shout out to them.
And in summary, basically getting to know both of you, Brooklyn and Cindy, through not only just this episode, but also prior engagements. I think really what I'm hearing is that when you're working with a property manager, you want to interview the property manager too. You want to really understand who they are, what their business model is, and make sure that it matches with the property you're buying. No different than looking for that real estate investment. Have a good conversation, find out what their availability is. And I would say definitely if somebody's in that Lower Mainland area, you're one of the ones they should be having a conversation with. So, thanks so much for bringing so much value, information, education to the show. And really appreciate you ladies for what you do.
Thank you so much.
ton of good information. We can tell you guys are passionate about this business, right? Like it just screams passion in this conversation. So absolutely love it. You guys have brought a ton of value to, realtors, investors, mortgage brokers, and us personally. So thanks for jumping on here and taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much for having us.